Now turn the AC off. Can we do that?
Is it on?
I don't know.
It always feels like it.
Cold in here.
I
At
think
7,
it's
it will get even
totally off.
Well, could you find me a blanket then?
Machine is on. Everybody watch what you say.
colder. No swearing.
Katie,
What?
Swearing.
no swearing.
Okay, I'll call this meeting to order. Pledge of allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. No public hearings tonight. I think we have one adjustment to the agenda.
Yes, Kate Marone from Healthy Lincoln has a small presentation.
Okay, we'll put that in as number 6.
Yes.
Is there a motion?
So move. Second.
All in favor? Okay, thank you. And the next item on the agenda is to hear from First Advisors.
That was fast. Oh, yay, I love presents.
I know, I promised you these, Dan, so.
Thank you. Got 2 each.
So you can lose one. I always have extra pads, correct?
All right.
Can I move the,
I have my own.
can I move the microphone in front of these people? So
Sure.
they'll be,
I'm wondering if there's a way of,
What do you want to do?
could they both sit at
They
the
can-
podium?
Okay, sure.
No, I wouldn't. I'd rather them sit at the table, but
because we want to.
I guess they are being,
Okay.
they are being covered by that camera.
we have 2 cameras.
Yep.
I think that'll do it.
Thanks,
Just
Katie.
a little bit of information for you all. Little bit, yeah. We won't drill down to all of it there. We'll have some highlights there on the
Thank you.
front page that we'll go over and take your questions.
Thank you.
My name is Matt Weaver. I'm the Chief Investment Officer for First Advisors. My colleague here is Ann Logue. You may know her. She's a resident of Waldoboro. We've managed the trust funds for town for 13 years. In fact, the anniversary is Friday, when we signed paperwork back in 2005. So thank you for having us. And we're happy to come and see you as often as you like. If you'd like us to come twice a year, once a year, 3 times, whatever you'd like. So we'd happy to give you an update on the funds. Back in 2005, the value of the trust fund was $923,000. The value of the trust fund as of today is $1.7 million, just over $1.7 million. The value of the cemetery funds at that time was $195,000. The value of the cemetery fund as of yesterday is $292,000. So we've had a pretty good returns here over the years, and I'm happy to talk about how we invest. During that time frame, the town has received a 35% fee discount off of our standard fee. Our standard fee is 1% of assets under management. We negotiated a pretty favorable fee for the town back then. Annualized returns, I'm going back about 6 years. Longer you go back, there's more information here for you. A little over 9% per year after the fee. A blended benchmark of a portfolio with the same investments had a return of about 8.5%. So we're beating a blended benchmark by about 60 basis points over the last 6 years. And just some notes here on how we do things, First Advisors, in terms of managing municipal assets. Of course, we're very conservative with town assets. We do not use individual stocks in municipal accounts. The reason we don't do that is we don't want headline risk in the portfolio. For instance, if you bought BP a few years ago, you woke up one morning and they had a rig that blew up in the middle of the Gulf and their stock went down 30–40%. So we prefer not to come to you and tell you a story like that. So we prefer to have mutual funds in the portfolio as preference over individual stocks. Again, we use broad-based, low-cost mutual funds. in high-grade individual fixed income investments, so CDs or bonds, to make up the portfolio. CD rates offer a better value than treasury bonds, so if you look at the portfolios, you won't see treasury bonds in there. I'll give you a good example. A 10-year treasury bond will give you a yield of about 3.2% today. We can go out and get you a 4-year CD for the same yield. So it's sort of a no-brainer. You want to keep your exposure to bonds short-term in nature so that when they come due, hopefully rates are higher and you can roll that over into a higher yielding investment. So that's our process, if you will, about managing fixed income investments in a very low rate environment. Now, rates have gone up a little bit over the last year and a half. We hope they go up a little bit more. It would certainly be good for our municipal clients if they could get a little bit more on their, earn a little bit more on their fixed income investments. So, but you have to make sure that you keep your exposure to fixed income investments very short term, because when rates go up, bond values go down. So I'll get to that in a moment. Moving on to the second report here is the trust fund statement. On page 2 is a summary of the investments. A breakdown at the top of how we do things here. Cash is about 4%. Equities or stocks is 54%. Fixed income, 41%. This is a statement that I produced. It goes from 2015 to yesterday. So we're talking a little over 3.5 years. Back in 15, beginning market value was 1.4 million. It's now 1.7, as I mentioned earlier. Over that time frame, the account was up 23.5%. Any questions?
I have a couple, yeah.
Yeah.
When you say you use a blended benchmark, what are some of the benchmarks that you're
Sure.
using?
The S&P 500 is the big one. For our equity exposure, large cap domestic makes up about 50% of our portfolio. So that's the blend. There's S&P 500, and then the EFA, which is an international benchmark, and then the Barclays Intermediate Bond is the bond side. So it's a blend of those. If you look on page 3 at the fund investments for the stocks, you'll see that we have exposure here to all markets. We have an emerging markets fund, we have an international stock fund, a couple of large cap domestic funds, the Dodge & Cox stock and the Fidelity Growth, and then we have a small cap fund and a mid cap fund. So we're gaining exposure to all these markets, which we think is important. But again, our bias is certainly to large cap domestic stocks, as you all know, Coca-Cola, Boeing, those types of names. Make up about 50%.
Now, are you favoring stocks that are giving you capital gains, or are you favoring stocks that give you income?
That's a good question. That's why we use 2 large cap funds in this portfolio. The Dodge & Cox stock fund is a value fund, so that one will have more utilities, companies that have higher dividends. The Fidelity Growth Fund is a fund that will invest more in technology names, Facebook, Amazon. If you look at the Fidelity Growth Fund, pretty impressive. The tax cost is $117,000. That means how much we paid for that fund. It's now worth $240,000. So the place to be over the last year and a half has certainly been growth. Those names have outperformed value, but we want to have exposure to both sides of the market.
Yep. How often do you balance the portfolio?
We rebalance at least once a year. We may do it twice, depending on if we see the market fluctuate more than 10%. We would do a rebalance.
So 10% is your market?
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Moving on to page 4, looking at some of the individual fixed income positions. These are mostly CDs here, and again, that's our reasoning is to buy high-quality CDs. If we keep our exposure to CDs under $250,000, then obviously we're under that FDIC insurance limit, and that's what we want to do there. we feel they're just as safe as a U.S. Treasury bond. We can get the same yield, but we don't have to go out 10 years. In fact, we keep most of our fixed income investments under 7 years in maturity. That just makes sense in a low rate environment. If we see rates go back to a more, if you call it a normal rate environment, which is you'd want to see 4% on the 10-year. If we get to that level, then we might take a little bit more, we might go out a little bit more on the yield curve. But at this point, it doesn't make sense to do that. So we keep our exposure to 7 years or less, typically, on our fixed income investments.
And you're not buying CDs from any particular bank. You're buying CD funds, it looks like.
No, we're actually buying CDs from institutions, HSBC, Goldman Sachs.
What page are you on?
Page 4.
Up the top. You didn't say page 4.
Yeah, no, I just don't see any of the,
Over to your left is the.
oh, there's Goldman
Fourth one down.
Sachs. Sorry,
Yeah.
okay,
Sure.
sorry about that.
Yep.
Do you buy any from your bank?
No, that'd be a
Thank you.
conflict.
Glad to hear that.
Yeah, no, we can't do that.
Not happening.
Can't do that. We do have some funds in here, some bond funds, and they're in here for a couple of reasons. One, liquidity. If you were to give us a request for distribution, we'd want to have some liquidity. We wouldn't want to, redeem a CD. And they're also in here to hedge. The Templeton Global Bond Fund is an instrument we use to hedge against domestic interest rate risk. And then we have the Vanguard Short-Term Inflation Protect Fund, which does the same thing. It's pegged to CPI, so if we see inflation go up, that's another way to hedge against interest rate risk. So there's a reason why we have these funds in here. You'll see a recurring theme. The short-term bond fund, short-term investment, these Vanguard funds are typically have a duration of 2 or 3 years, so all of the bonds within them are going to come due in a very short time, and there's very little interest rate risk here.
Yep.
You would have to see interest rates go up 1% for these funds to be down about 2%. So that's what we're comfortable with at this time. But again, we might take a little bit more, might get a little bit more yield down the road if we see rates go up.
Okay.
Any questions? The second statement in here is for the cemetery funds. They're invested in similar to the trust account. The only difference is the objective is a little more conservative, and so the equity portfolio, the percentage is 40% as opposed to 54% on the trust funds. That's something we might want to talk about, with you, Julie, or Peg, is we might want to be more consistent with the two funds and have a more balanced objective for both of them. They're both perpetual in nature.
Yes,
They
they
want to
are.
be around forever, and I would make a suggestion that you might want to be consistent with the objective and have a balanced objective for both. The objective files that we have, the objective forms that we have on file right now show this account is income over growth, which is about 40-60. So we might want to be 50-50 on this one. Rate of return, being a little more conservative, is a little over 19% over that same period. The only difference between this account and the trust account in terms of investing is we don't buy individual fixed income investments for this because it's smaller. The market value is smaller, and it's more difficult to buy individual fixed income securities, and we buy the funds as opposed to the individual fixed income investments. Going through this packet a little bit more here, we have a couple of performance reports here from our vendor. This has the pie chart on the front. They're one page. They'll show you what we've done over a number of time frames. Since inception, which is not the inception of the account, but actually the inception of using this particular vendor, which is 2012. Like I said, we're up 9% over that time frame on the trust account. 7% on the cemetery funds over that same time frame. Again, they're managed a little more conservatively, but again, I might want to suggest changing that. Finally, at the back of this packet here, we have a quarterly newsletter we send out to our clients. Happy to get all of your emails and add you to that list, and we can send this out to you. Just a little note for me, about where we think we're headed in both the equity and fixed income markets. We don't get into too much forecasting, but we do think that there'll be higher rates in the future. That's not really going out on a limb, but we've been preparing for this for a long time, and we've had short-term fixed income investments, because we wanted to be proactive. And it's worked out well. We've really haven't seen any any losses in the fixed income side of the portfolio. So.
I just want to say, Matt handled me really well. We had our first meeting, Matt and Peg and I was very, very, very hard on him. He saved the first and doing business with us, and I want to publicly say that. He literally saved the day.
Thanks.
Good job.
He did a really good job. But I felt much better having sat down with Matt, and Peg and I both had a good feeling when we left that meeting, because we did RFP proposals, and obviously we stayed with the first. Matt, you are a very large part of that, and
Great.
I'm
It's good to
not.
hear.
It is, and I'm saying it publicly, so hopefully your bosses find out too.
You as boss, Ann.
I will be honest with you, changing. I have a tendency to be a little stubborn, and it's very hard to change my mind when at times, and it really takes something very special and a good argument, and you had that.
Good, thank you
And
very
I
much.
just publicly want to say how wonderful you are.
I'll make sure he's watching the public access channel, whatever night it is.
Well, you should have gotten a letter.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And just quickly, I'd say, I'd like to meet with both of you, again, Peg and you, to talk about the policy.
Yes.
I think it's.
We also have two members of our finance committee.
Oh, good.
Our select board, Abden Simmons and Bob Butler, so I think if you could meet with all
Oh, sure, I'd
four of
love
us,
to.
that would be great.
Yeah, the policy, it's a good
For the
policy.
debt policy.
Yeah, it's a good policy, but it's heavy on language regarding what a municipal officer or employee can or cannot do. You might want to add some language that also gives us a little bit of breathing room or leeway in terms of how we manage the investments. In other words, I've seen some towns have like a 60-40 range on both bonds and stocks. It allows us to add some value. In other words, if we see, storm clouds on the horizon, for instance, maybe we can move that dial back from 54% on the stocks to 45.
And that's an open dialogue that you typically have with your municipal officers.
Yes, yep. So,
And just because I'm giving shout outs, Arnie, we have to, Peg Tynan is our new finance director, and I can't say enough. A big part of this whole meeting was set up by Peg so that we could, Peg and I think both feel like we need to be very transparent about what we're doing. And I think that the board appreciates that, and you need to be well informed. So I like the idea of you coming once or twice a year. I think that that's important for the select board to understand where the money is and what it's doing. So I
He did
appreciate
ask
it.
if he could come more often.
I know.
Yeah. And that would be good.
good.
Okay. I think a future meeting, we need to look at the investment policy again. I don't know when the last time was that the board saw it.
Well, I think what we should do is have the meeting with Peg, myself, Matt, and the two of you, and then
Okay.
have a discussion with Matt, and then bring that to the full board.
And I have, several policies here that I'll give to Peg. that
Please.
She can look at.
That would be wonderful. I know our auditor is also going to provide us with policies, and I think between all of us, we can come up with a good one.
Good.
Okay, that's great.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Any more comments or questions? All set? Appreciate your coming tonight.
Sure. Thank you.
And then we have Kate Marone.
She's back there. Kate Malone, I think you're on.
We love seeing Kate.
What does she have there?
Talk about the marijuana committee.
You're not going to talk about marijuana?
Well, I'll talk about marijuana, but not the committee. Actually, if you want to take these, Katie, you can pass those. Thank you. I'm trying to figure out, I have some visuals. I'm trying to figure out the best place to put them.
Why don't you just put them right on the chairs? It's probably even better than, you don't even have to set up your fancy easel.
Okay. So thank you for the opportunity to come and share this with you. Kate Marone. I'm here in my capacity as the Director of Healthy Lincoln County to share with you the results of our recent health assessment that we've done around youth substance use in Lincoln County. I am prioritizing and sharing this with the 4 most populated towns in Lincoln County and their select boards, and then I'm going to roll it out to other populations. And I'm starting with the local elected officials because I think it's important that you guys have this information to inform you either personally or professionally or in your elected official capacity. So just to kind of start it off, a little bit of background on what we do and why we do it, is we are assessing what our young people in Lincoln County are saying in regards to drugs and alcohol. And the reason why we do that is because we need to make sure that we're not just doing whatever we think is best based on no information. We need to know what's going on, and we need to have current information on what's going on, not just hearsay, not just stories. So we do an assessment every 2 years. A big chunk of that assessment is around a survey that is administered to students across the state of Maine. It's called the Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey. If you're not familiar with it, it's administered every other February. So the last time it was administered was February of 2017. All 4 of the high schools in Lincoln County participated. 7 out of the 8 middle school grades, or middle school grade schools participated. And at the same time that the students were taking this massive health survey that they take every other year, we also do a phone survey out of my office where we contact parents of middle school and high school students who live in Lincoln County, and we talk to about 400 parents. And so while the kids are being surveyed, we're also surveying the parents. The next part of the assessment, we do key informant interviews with law enforcement, healthcare, schools, pretty much anyone we can. We talk to about what they're seeing. So we're not just getting the survey information, we're also talking to people and seeing if it matches up. And then the last kind of big part of what we did was a student photo project called Photo Voice this past spring, where we invited students from across Lincoln County, and Miller School participated in that, where we had students take photos of the factors in their life that either contributed or discouraged them from using drugs and alcohol. So these could be factors at an individual level within their family, their home, their school, their neighborhood. And we took all those photos, we processed those with the kids, and we talked about them. They had to come up with captions for the photos and what they meant, and then we displayed them across Lincoln County, including a display that we had up in the Waldeboro Library for, I think, about a month, throughout the month of May. So we take all this and we put it all together, and we talk to kids, and we say, does this match up with what you're seeing? And we put it all together so that we can share it. It informs what I do in my work, it informs what many of my partners do, and it informs hopefully what our local elected officials will do. So the highlights is all I'm going to share with you. I don't want to take up too much time, and there's literally hundreds of pages of information I could share, but I'm just giving you the key points. The big thing that we always look at first is how many kids are using, what are they using. So this is the first time that more kids told us that they were using marijuana than alcohol. So traditionally, alcohol is the most misused or abused substance by teenagers in Lincoln County and Maine. In Lincoln County, in the 2017 survey, marijuana was higher. So 22%, 1 in 5 of our high school students say that they use marijuana on a regular basis. Just short of that, at 19%, of our students are saying that they're drinking on a regular basis, and the numbers go down from there. The next thing I would point out is when we look at tobacco products, and Maine just passed Tobacco 21 last summer, and so now tobacco is also one of the age-restricted products for being 21 and older. So traditionally, in terms of youth using tobacco products, the numbers have never been lower. But all of a sudden now, with the emergence of e-cigarettes, more students are reporting using e-cigarettes over traditional tobacco products, whether it's cigarettes or dip or any cigars, what you name it. So that number has been going down historically, and now e-cigarettes has come out at now 14.5%, and this was in 2017, before the big emergence of Juuls and vaping really took hold in the last year. So we are expecting that number to go up when the students take the survey again in February of 2019. The lowest in terms of students who are currently misusing that stopped substances, prescription drugs. And so in the midst of the opioid crisis, a lot of people assume that that number is going to be higher. But what we're finding is the opioid crisis is really affecting the 18 and up population and not so much the 18 and under. Most people who are misusing or abusing opioids, including heroin and prescription drug opioids, don't start with those. They usually start with other substances when they're in high school or middle school. So that's how many are actually saying that they're using. And when we talk to students and say, is this accurate? Is this, a lot of people say, oh, kids lie on these things. They're not going to tell us the truth. Most kids will tell us, yeah, that's pretty indicative of what I'm experiencing, me and my friends, and what I understand to be true. Usually kids will kind of overinflate what they think everyone else is doing. They kind of assume everyone else is doing it if they're not. But when we compare ourselves to the rest of the state, there's no major differences. When we compare ourselves to ourselves from previous years, there's tiny incremental changes. So we have no reason to believe that this data is not valid, and it's pretty much the best information that we have access to. When we look at why students are using, there's a few different factors that we like to look at. One is, do they think that the substance is harmful? Do they have an attitude that it could be risky or harmful for them to use? When we look at all of the substances, only 1/3 felt like marijuana could be risky or harmful to their health. The others, it was at least 50% or higher felt like there was any kind of risk or harm from using. So for alcohol, it was 57%, tobacco, 86%, and also prescription drugs, 86%. So the message is hit home. Kids know prescription drugs can be really harmful. Tobacco can be really harmful. Alcohol could go either way, and very few students feel like there's any harm to using marijuana at their age. The other thing that we look at is how easy is it for them to get? If they think that they could get their hands on it, they're more likely to try it. More than half of our students believe that it would be easy to get alcohol, marijuana, and tobacco products. And these are the three that are age restricted to 21 and up. So they feel like if they wanted to, they could get, whether it's from a store, family member, a friend, their own house. Fewer students felt like they could access prescription drugs for misuse. So that's good news. Only 20% of our population of kids said, I could easily get my hands on some prescription drugs. Considering that's where they usually get them and start using for misusing, that's really positive. Another big factor that we look at is age of initiation. We've learned a lot about the brain in the last 20 years, and what we know is that the brain is not fully developed well until your mid-20s. And so a young brain that's exposed to substances is going to develop a stronger, longer-lasting addiction than an older brain. If people haven't started smoking by the time they're 20, 25 years old, they're not likely to start. But if they start when they're 12, they're likely to have a lifelong addiction to nicotine. And that's because the addiction latches on to a developing brain in a different way than a fully grown brain. So when we look at how many students have tried alcohol and how many of those have tried it before the age of 13, which is 27% of those who've tried it, say that they've tried it before they were 13 years old. With marijuana, about 1/3 of our students have tried it at least once, and 1/4 of those tried it before they were 13 years old. So that's concerning to me, that we have a good chunk of our student body, of our young people, that are either finding it and trying it and potentially going on to use it on a regular basis. So on the flip side, We also look outside of just the substances. The survey covers a lot of different health topics in addition to substance use. It covers safety, seatbelt use, sexual behavior, nutrition, all kinds of different things. And a lot of it is bigger picture. What are some of those root causes? What are some of those, factors that are really contributing to why these students are using? So on the left of this, and you have all this information in your packets, basically, between 1 in 5 and 1 in 4 of our students say that they've experienced violence in the home that's made them want to leave, that they are experiencing or have experienced depression-like symptoms, and that they have experienced 3 or more adverse childhood experiences. And this is a term, we use ACEs for short. It's a term that, if you're not familiar with it, it's reflective of this research that came out in the late 90s around these 10 different categories of experiences, that if someone experiences those before the age of 18, research has shown that the more of those you experience, the more likely you are to experience just about every possible health condition. The risk for that increases exponentially. So someone who's had 7 to 10 of those, for example, is at significantly increased risk for things like heart disease and cancer, not just what you might imagine around mental health or addiction. So we like to use 3 to 4 as kind of this, that's kind of where things start to change. Adverse childhood experiences could be things like abuse, neglect, domestic violence. It could be things like parent separation or divorce. It could be something like food insecurity. It could be a parent that's incarcerated. There's a wide variety. And so what they do is they find out how many of these a student has experienced, and we can kind of predict long-term what kind of health effects this might have. On the flip side of that, we also look at those protective factors. What are the things in a young person's life that are going to protect them from these kinds of things, that are going to discourage those unhealthy behaviors? And what we have found is most of our students feel like they have a family that gives them love and support. Family connectedness, family support is a huge factor. We look at community. 60% of our students felt like they matter in their community. I personally am a little discouraged when I see that number, except that I know that it's going up, and it has been going up over the past many years, so it's going in the right direction. But that means that 4 out of 10 of our kids don't feel like they matter in our community, and to me that's definitely an area that we all need to do some work. And about the same number feel like their school cares about kids and encourages them. So again, 6 out of 10 feel like I'm getting what I need from my school, I'm getting what I need from my community, but 4 out of 10 still not quite feeling that yet. So what I like to do now is kind of share with you what do we do with this information. Some people can use this to pursue grant applications. We have a wealth of data, and so we like to share it with our community partners so that they can use it to pursue that funding to make new programs happen in the schools or in the community. You can also use this to support policies that encourage retailer compliance. When we talk about kids feeling like it's easy to get their hands on these products if they want to, they're either going to get them from a social avenue, friends or family, or they're going to get them from a store or a restaurant. And so what are some of the policy things that we can do to encourage compliance with that? We work with the Sheriff's Office to do compliance checks with all of our alcohol retailers every year. And so we know that about, give or take, 8 to 10% of our compliance checks, the establishment fails, meaning that a clerk or a waiter accidentally sells to a minor who's undercover. And so those establishments then are kind of influenced into making sure that their people get some training. But can we be more proactive about that? Can we put into place a policy or an ordinance that would require liquor license establishments to make sure that their people are trained on a regular basis? There's a lot of turnover in that industry, and it's a way of being proactive to make sure that, yeah, I'm 18 years old, and my cousin comes in the door and wants me to sell them beer, and I don't know how to handle that. Those kinds of situations come up all the time. And so how do we make sure that that's not where our young people are getting their alcohol, their tobacco products, and eventually their marijuana? The next thing is that anyone who, we know that alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana are legally available and can be used by adults in Maine. And kids can get their hands on them, and like I said, in a variety of ways. So if people have those in their homes, secure them, monitor your stock. We have had kids either accidentally or maybe on purpose bring these substances to school. We know that they can get their hands on them. And so what are the ways that people in their own homes can make sure that they're keeping an eye on it? I think most people probably heard a story about someone going to take their bottle of vodka and pour a drink, and they realize it's water, and their kid swapped it out. You got to keep an eye on those kinds of things and really make sure that you're monitoring it. So all adults, that's something that anyone can do. Letting the youth, if you have a young person in your life, whether it's a child, a grandchild, niece, nephew, neighbor, anyone that's young, how do you engage with them, and how do you let them know that they matter, and how do you encourage them, and how do you connect them to your community? How do you make sure that they have an opportunity to feel connected to their community? Because we know that that is a major contributor to mental health and physical health. And then reminding others that while these substances are legal for all adults in Maine, they are not yet safe for young people's brains. And that's something that, there's we're going through a cultural shift. For a long time, and for many people, there's still this belief that kids are going to experiment. They're going to try these things. I did it and I'm still alive kind of attitudes, and we understand that. But we also know that there's potentially lifelong effects that could happen in those early years. And so how do we start to help people understand that when it comes to young brains, it's just there's no amount that's considered safe, and that I have seen 15-year-old students who have started vaping and have full-fledged nicotine addictions and don't want them, but don't know what to do. And it's something that they know that it's going to be a long haul. Anyone who's ever had to quit smoking can probably attest to how difficult that can be. And when you're 15, you're not necessarily going to have the skills to be able to handle that in the same way. So that's pretty much the highlights of the data. I shared in your packet with you a summary of that as well. We have a new fact sheet around vaping and juuling for parents to be aware, because it's something that's very, very trendy with kids right now. It's very discreet. And within a Juul device, and I think you guys have probably heard about these from Officer Spear when he came to talk to you before, within the vape device, particularly the Juul product, one pod of juice has the same amount of nicotine as a pack of cigarettes. And so we know that if a kid can go through one pod, for example, in a day, that's the rough equivalent of it. And a lot of parents and adults, bus drivers, aren't necessarily familiar with what these even look like and interpret them to be something else because they're so small and they're so discreet. The other things I included, something around resilience, which refers to the adverse childhood experiences. The Lincoln County Recovery Collaborative, which is the group that's working with the police departments and the recovery groups, has a new campaign out, Arrive Alive, and it's about impaired driving. And so I included some information on that. And then prescription drug safety. Anyone who has any prescription drugs that they want to make sure that they can store them safely. In my office, I have tons of locking medication storage bags that anyone can have for free. So on the back of that one is the information about those. This is really good if you're traveling or if you're on a medication that is at a high risk of being misused or abused. We're giving those away, so please feel free to refer anyone to those. And finally, I'm just here also on behalf of our coalition of community members and youth. And so if there's ever anyone who wanted to attend or participate in those, if this is something that they're interested in, to let me know. Any questions?
When you talk about marijuana, are you talking about smoking marijuana or whatever other ways?
There are several different ways that students can ingest marijuana, whether it's smoking, eating it through edibles, dabbing. So we're talking about all of them.
All together.
Using it in one of those ways.
Is there any one that young people use more than other?
I know dabbing is pretty trendy, but I don't know if it's trendy around here. I honestly don't know. I haven't heard of students, but I see someone nodding.
I've heard of people
What is dabbing?
Explain it.
It's a highly concentrated,
Go dab.
not,
It's,
looks like a little,
It looks like a.
little dots that you used to buy and.
Oh,
Hey.
those are like those little candy things?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're
all right.
like that.
It's,
there.
it's
Okay.
very concentrated.
Very,
So
Little dab will do you?
Yeah.
Like that?
like several people.
So if you think, marijuana these days, so back in like the 70s, 80s, 90s, most marijuana was anywhere from 3 to 10% THC on average. Nowadays, that's more like 20 to 25, maybe 30. The concentrated products goes up from there, and you can have products that are 90, 95% THC. So it's very, very concentrated, and so that means like a serving size would be a very, very small amount, like the size of a pinpoint. Imagine that, and you use. It's hard to explain, but basically you melt it down and it vaporizes and you inhale it. And so what often happens is because it's so concentrated, people use more than they probably realize, and they can experience a very quick, very, very intense high. Because it's a lot more. There's a lot of waxes and oils and concentrates, and it's kind of the wild, wild west. A lot of different people are producing different things and trying different things right now. You can vape marijuana with cannabis oil. You can also, obviously, edibles are becoming very popular. You probably read in the news about the woman who's exposing lobsters to marijuana before she's cooking them. And I guess the state said, hold on a second on that. Let's wait and see.
It's on the news.
I know, I read about
But
it.
it is very much kind of the sky's the limit right now, and a
Okay.
lot of people are trying out a lot of different technologies and things.
I asked that because you mentioned about cigarettes, and they see that cigarettes are not good for you.
Yeah.
And so smoking marijuana seems like smoking anything is not good for you. They would know that.
The problem
So
is
it's
they're
all the
getting a
other
mixed
stuff.
message, though.
Yeah. With-
That's the problem.
Yeah.
They're
And-
definitely getting a mixed message about marijuana.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think the problem is that with a teenage brain, when they hear that, because a lot of people will say it's safer than heroin. And what young people hear is safe. They leave off the part and they just hear safe. There's, I think there is also the idea that it could have some medical benefit for some people means that it's safe. But what I tell them is that every prescription drug, whether it saves lives or not, is going to have side effects. Anytime you put any kind of outside chemical into your body, there's going to be a side effect. And it's going to affect different people in different ways. Even aspirin has side effects, right? So just because it has medical benefit does not necessarily mean that it's harmless. And that's, the message that we try to make sure our young people understand. And for me, it's not really about comparing one substance to another. Because if that's the mark of well, at least they're not using heroin. Why does that have to be success? Why can't success be they're not using anything? So that's, a cultural shift that a lot of people are undergoing right now, and it's kind of why it's still a bit of an uphill battle. Any other questions?
Freeman?
In the statewide testing for K to 12, or K to 11, effectively, there's a material amount of our children that don't meet this standard. Is there any correlation between the smoking, alcohol, or marijuana use and academic underachievement with our children?
Yes, there have been a lot of studies showing correlations between different substances and academic performance. The way that some substances can affect the brain can actually affect the learning capacity of the brain. And if you think about addiction as actually a type of learning, addiction can actually kind of overtake parts of the brain so that the learning isn't happening in other areas. And so, yes. Long story short, there have been several studies to show that correlation, and that students who, For example, with marijuana, we know that it affects motivation, we know that it affects learning, and so coordination. So all of those tasks that you would need to do, for example, in school or sports, are going to be affected by that use.
Any other questions? Well said. Kate, thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank you very much.
Appreciate
Good
it.
information here.
And thank you for not making me wait 2.5 hours like I did with another town meeting. It was very fascinating, but it was a long time. So I
Next,
appreciate it.
Do you put this material in school so the kids can see them?
We take a slightly different approach with students because they don't respond to this information the same way adults do. So we present it in a different way, but we have some plans for this school year that we're working on right now. Yep.
Good.
Healthy Lincoln County.
next item on the agenda is citizens' comments. Do we have any? Seeing none, next item is select board comments.
Wow.
Katie?
I took a little trip down to Gross Neck to see how things are progressing down there with the highway department. And there is a big difference down there, and it looks good. They're curving out the ditches all the way down and seeding, putting grass in there. And I came across one of my old friends, Raymond Carter, and I had a nice long talk with him. And he is he's very favorable with what has been being done. And a lot of people down there are too. As a matter of fact, one of the Huss farms had an electrified fence right up along the street. And John had to go in there and curve it out for the ditches. And the guy said, I'll move my fence 20 feet in so you can have this property to do that. And he did. And they're very good down there for John and what he's been doing. They're very liking what they're seeing and getting the street ready to be paved for next spring.
Cool.
So that was very encouraging.
It's nice.
Any other comments from the select board?
Congratulations to Clint.
Yes?
You didn't even mention it.
What?
Congratulations to Clint. You got married?
Married.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I didn't think you'd forgotten that already. Not a good sign.
He hasn't forgotten.
Did you have something?
No, I'm good.
I do want to mention that there's an art walk, and I'm mentioning it early, but we don't have a meeting, I don't think, between now and the time that, we'll have one more meeting. On the 13th of October, there will be an art walk in October in Waldeboro. I think it's the last one of the year, isn't it, Pam?
It is, but I think some of the downtown places will continue having
Okay.
art openings
Yeah.
throughout the.
And you did something Saturday night.
What did I do
You
Saturday?
went to the Broadway Church.
Oh,
and
I did,
Listened
yes.
to a lecture about,
Oh, I did, about
Lincoln?
Abraham Lincoln,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I love history. I love hearing about history, yeah. That was really nice, and there were lots of people, and I have to say, the Historical Society folks, they bring some really good food. So if you want to go to some sort of a meal at this Historical Society, that's a plus. It was the Historical Society, it was their last big thing, I think, of this year, and they had a woman who is the CEO of the Abraham Lincoln Museum
right?
speak. And she's here because she has a friend who grew up in Waldeboro. I think it's Jane Corson. And so Jane was here and said, hey, to the Historical Society, I have a friend you might be interested in. And that's how she came, from one of our local people. She was very interesting. She wrote a couple books, but one of them was on the Gettysburg Address. And they put out, it was an idea she had, and they put out this an invitation to lots of people, politicians, famous people, kids, man on the street, woman on the street, anybody, to write something, 272 words, which is the number of words in the Gettysburg Address, and to write something. And they got numerous. They got, I think, all the living former presidents wrote something, and they asked that they be written in longhand. And some of the people really couldn't write in a legible longhand, so they asked if it could be typed. Jimmy Carter was the one who called to ask if it would be possible if he could type his on a typewriter. And he did. And they're going to do another similar, but they're nice and short. You know, that's 272 words. That's easy. It's readable. It's quick and easy. I have the book, and I haven't started reading it. I have a history teacher's son, so I have to read it first to make sure it's okay, and then I give it to him. But it was really interesting, and they left us with the gift of knowledge. And one nice thing, and some people mentioned it, I got to give the speaker a little certificate of appreciation from the town of Waldoboro, and she really liked that. So, I mean, and that was just a little something that made her have a good feeling about our town. And it was very nice. But that's not what I was going to talk about. I'm so sorry John Higgins isn't here, too. I spent 3 days at conferences since we last met. Huh? On the agenda? Okay, I'll do that later then. Okay. That's all.
Okay. It's what you're going to talk about later.
It's on the
Yeah,
agenda.
it's on the agenda.
Yeah, okay.
Good.
I just didn't want her to,
Thank you.
Yes, take over.
no, that's fine.
Consent calendar.
No, town managers report.
Sorry. Thank you,
You
Katie.
can skip me, I'm gonna
You're
keep it really
keeping me in
short.
line.
Short and
Town
sweet,
managers report. Sorry, Julie.
neither of which describes me. Short and sweet, never mind. The RFP for the LED streetlights, we received one response. I went over it with the EDC on Friday. Their recommendation is to put it out again, as is Bill Napower, the town planners.
I will discuss that with you in a moment. Go ahead.
They just feel like it was very busy time for them, and that we might get a better price if we put it out again. So that was their recommendation. I know that some people don't agree with that, so I guess we're going to hear about that shortly. The ladder truck, as you know, has been a big item of discussion. We received notification of the Assistance to Firefighters grant from FEMA. What I would like to ask you tonight to consider is authorizing me to put in a grant application for the ladder truck. That's a good thing, people. Everybody should be happy. So if you could, at some point later on in the meeting, just vote to approve me to put in an application.
It's an adjustment to the agenda.
That would be great, yes. And that is pretty much, Chief of Police, we're going to set up a meeting. The period closed. We have 3 applications. Several people were scared away. Not scared away, but I was very blunt and forward with a lot of the questions that I received about salary and benefits. So I've weeded out down to, I don't want to ever waste anybody's time by saying you're going to make $140,000 and we're going to give you a car to drive home at night, because that's not going to happen. So we might as well just tell them flat out, no, that's not what the package is.
Yep.
So I was very open about that. So hopefully we have 3 candidates that I think the committee will find very, very good. We did some more testing on the Medomic. I will defer to Abden on that if you wanted to update people on that, or if we just want me to say, but we did do some more in-depth testing along some tributaries to the Medomic. Those test results came back, and we're going to further explore the areas that tested hotter than other areas. Just wanted to go again, at the last meeting, we were asked, Abden wanted to know the cost of the school. The bond was for $24 million over a 20-year period.
Right.
And our portion of the debt service that went on for the school is $662,646, and that is part of the RSU 40 budget.
For
That's just for the
This
Region
year.
8 school costs,
this year.
debt service for this year.
Okay.
And that's it.
Thank you. Okay. Now the consent calendar.
Move approval.
Second.
All right, discussion. I have a question regarding the minutes. Section 10.2 of the minutes, Pine Street Landing paving of it. The vote in the minutes was 5-0. The vote should have been 4-0 with one abstention.
Right.
Okay, it's just a correction that needs to be made.
Okay.
And I would ask you to amend the motion to approve with the suggested change, and then we can move on.
Do we have thank you? I thought we had some thank you letters.
We do have thank you
Would you
letters.
like to read
I
those?
can do those. I'll do those very quickly.
Yep.
We did have, well, two are very short and sweet, but we had two residents, John, who is John Burbank, I believe, and also Carl Hallowell. We're just thanking the staff in the front office for everything that they do, which was very nice. We also received, and this is to Rose Darrell, Eileen, and others, so I guess we're others, Peg, from Larry and Susan Hodgkins. Just many thanks for all your personable service, smiles, assistance, and patience at your jobs. Miss you and think of you often, but they are well. And the salmon have swum back to Ellsworth, where it has all began for me. They appreciate having both the firemen and the police departments and for their fine work, which is never taken for granted. And thank you all for making Waldoboro a wonderful place to live and raise a family. They spent 30 years here, which hardly seems possible looking back. I know it sounds like a sentimental journey, but it is a fact, a tribute to all of you who made your jobs a pleasure to interact with, and you are a special part of the day, and it provided great interaction. You all deserve so much more than thanks. But, you know, we don't always get nice thank you letters, and it's nice to be
Yeah.
appreciated.
They are a very nice
I mean,
couple.
it is nice.
Yeah, they were very nice.
Yep.
Yeah, that couple was unique.
Okay.
Nice people.
Yep, they are. Yeah, that is nice. It's nice to say thank you. It's nice that somebody sends a comment for good things instead of complaining.
Right.
You know, it's easy to get a complaint.
So the motion is on the board, just on the table with just that correction to the minutes. Is that all right?
So,
Is there,
Second.
all right, all in favor? Done? Okay. Under old business, there is none. Under new business, a timeline for the shoreline zoning changes. I wanted this on the agenda because I didn't feel we should wait until June to figure this out. We can't get it on the ballot in November, but we could certainly ask the planning board to work on it so that we might get a vote.
Well, they are working on it, and part of the issue is they did contact the Department of Ag. They're going to work on some best practices. The consensus seems to be to wait till June, because that will give all the residents an opportunity to vote on it. If you have a special meeting, there's only going to be a few that show up. And I think that was the planning board's feeling, was that if we missed November, then you might as well do it in June. And it's not going to be an additional cost, but you will get the full town out to vote on it. And it gives them time to do the best practices and things like that that they would like to handle. I understand we have one person who's very vocal,
No, it's not the one person. It's not, it really isn't.
Okay.
That's not where I'm coming from at all.
but
It really isn't.
But,
It's not- that's
but
not
we
where-
do have somebody who is very vocal about it. But, you know, I think that we deserve, the river deserves the consideration to have the best practices,
Oh. no
you know?
question.
And it might take them a little bit of time to get there. But I don't think it's going to be a heavy lift.
So we're saying June, and we're setting a deadline for June, is that what we're?
Oh, well, it'll have to be probably not even June, it'll probably be February.
Oh, great.
To be put on the
It'll
June
be
ballot.
February to be put on the June
June
ballot,
ballot.
so they're gonna have a timeline.
Okay. Well, if it's February, then I think we ought to have another look at what they've got and maybe review whether.
You
we-
probably should. I mean, for what you guys went through that night, you probably should spend more time on it. And I think that's one of the things we have to get to, especially when we're doing ordinances. I think the select board needs to be more vigilant and have more time. And I know I upset Bill Napower. I did. There's no question. And I'll be honest, I just think that for them to give it to you the night before and then like week before, and then you have to review it. Let's be honest. Some of you are only looking at it when you first get here. It is what it is. It deserves more time to be looked at.
Absolutely.
So you are changing zoning. It's one of the most important things that you get to vote on, and you should know it and understand it and have more time than one meeting to look at it.
My hope is they're gonna do an inventory of the farmland along.
They
the
did.
river. No, they know how many farms there are. They haven't done an inventory.
No, well, no, but
They haven't gone door to door and asked
No.
people what they're doing.
But they have an idea of where they're going now.
That's important.
And Max was working on that
Good.
this last week.
Okay,
So that's where we are on that.
all right. Ice Pond, sorry.
No, we're working on the land use ordinance anyway. the
Correct.
entire-
Right, but
Correct.
this is just the
Entire thing,
shoreline
and that-
zoning
yeah,
part.
yeah.
Okay. Ice Pond.
We
weed
received a
control.
request from Karen Rowan, who lives on Ice Pond, their homeowners association. Ice Pond is one of our fire ponds, but it's also their pond that they enjoy. And it has experienced, I don't know exactly what it is. It's
It's an
an
invasive
invasive weed.
weed.
I don't know the exact name of the
Milfoil?
weed. Yes.
It's milfoil.
Yes, thank you, Abden. They would like us to assist them at the state level and support the removal of the weed.
Yep.
So if you would authorize the letter that you had in your packet.
What they've given us as a letter is really one that's signed by me, and it really isn't on behalf of the select board, and I'd really like to be on, if you're all in agreement, to be on behalf of the select board, for me to sign it. And I think they're asking you to sign one too, Julie.
I haven't gotten that request yet.
Okay.
They had the fire chief do
They had
it.
the fire chief do
I
something?
think it's redundant to have me do it. It's really yours
Okay.
to do, but if they want me to, I can.
Anyway, I'd like the letter, I'm happy to sign the letter, but I'd like to do it on behalf of the entire Waldeboro Select Board, if you're amenable to that, and would make a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes.
Katie?
Should we specify what kind of weed that is instead of just saying invasive weed? Should we call it milfoil weed?
It's their letter. I'd rather not edit that part of it unless, I mean, we can suggest they do it.
Oh, it looks like this is your letter.
It
Well,
is, but they provided it for
provided
him.
it. It's the letter they provided for us to look at and approve.
Okay.
And is it really milfoil?
And that's the other point.
I think it is. That makes, I remember that name now.
They
I didn't
vote-
remember it
Do they
before.
vote in there?
No.
How did it get in there?
That was the question.
Yeah,
Right.
that,
Could be birds, cranes and stuff, carry that stuff.
Yeah.
I've dealt with that before, and just, it's weird.
well, that
Okay.
covers any kind of
Are you all
invasive
set?
weed. so
All
that's
right, all in
right.
favor? Good, thank you.
IFW was usually taking, put tarps down on the bottom, and it kills it, because it can't grow without sun. And it kills it off.
Okay, the next thing on the agenda is the LED.
As I mentioned in my
RFP.
report, we received one response to our RFP for the LED streetlights. I went over that with the EDC committee, Economic Development Committee, on Friday, and their recommendation, along with Bill Napower's recommendation, was that we put it out again, just to see if we can get more response. One of the issues that was brought up was there's so many of them doing LEDs right now, that maybe they didn't feel like bidding on it. Or maybe it was a too complicated RFP. It wasn't too complicated. The RFP was actually very good. But that was their recommendation to see, because there are other towns that have other companies doing it, and this is the same person who bid on it originally. There was also some discussion that day if possibly our prior interaction with Real Term discouraged other bidders from potentially bidding because it looked like that's who we wanted. So they thought if we put it out in a more general way, and possibly used a couple of other places to advertise it, that we might get a better response.
All right, thank you. I was at that meeting, but I wasn't there when they discussed the RFP. I did talk after the meeting to Jen Merritt, who chaired the meeting, and I had a conversation with Bill Napower. And it wasn't their sense that there was a recommendation from the committee. There was no vote, as far as I know. John, you were there.
John,
Was there a vote?
There was a discussion,
Yeah, that's what everybody said, there was a discussion.
and there was also consideration that the RFP was put out in the middle of the summer, when people are not necessarily focused on things like this as much as they would be if we did it this fall. I heard that too.
I'm going to say, they may not have voted, but it was definitely their recommendation. I mean, I think they're
But there was
parsing
no-
words.
There was no vote.
That's right.
But there was a
But there was a
recommendation.
there was a consensus or sense of the committee, I guess
Consensus
is
is
what you're
probably the
saying.
best word.
Okay, we'll do consensus.
Yep.
I'd like to move this thing forward, and for a couple of reasons. One, we've been looking at this since November of 2016, when I went to the conference with LJ to examine what LED lighting was all about. Bill Napower did say that the lack of response may have been related to the fact that a lot of people don't want to bid on town projects because they're a lot more difficult than private sector projects, and they don't get paid on time, or they don't get paid as quickly. And the big money is in the private projects, not in the town projects. The third point is that when you look at their initial proposal, and it wasn't really a proposal, it was just kind of a description of what LED does and what the savings are. We only got a budget line item approved for this ballot in June, so we really couldn't have done anything before then. But if we delay it any further, we're looking at possibly next year sometime. And we're throwing away potential savings. If we had jumped on this right away and got it on the budget for 2017-18, we'd have saved $18,000 after all is said and done just in 1 year. Or well, just say $10,000. If we wait longer, we're potentially losing more savings. The fact is, we only did get one bid. Everybody, there were what, 4 bidders who had an option to present?
8.
8 bidders.
I
That's a
sent it to
pretty-
8 people.
That's a
Well,
pretty
8
good,
companies.
that's a pretty good field to choose from. If 7 are saying they're not interested, the market is telling us something.
Question, I have a question. Did were there any formal no bids?
No.
So that to me.
No, but there were questions. People did have questions that were answered and answers were
Without a
provided.
formal no bid, I
But
would say
no
that
formal no bid.
the consensus is probably pretty accurate, that we need to go back out somehow with an RFP.
Okay, thank you.
How long would that take?
We
Well,
could
that's-
just put it out for another 2 weeks or another month. It depends. And I will be honest with you too, I put it out to the Renewable Energy Subcommittee, and I've never heard, they never scheduled a meeting, which is why I took it directly to the EDC.
Good. Okay,
Because I didn't want to wait. I wanted some guidance on this.
okay.
It's just that typically, I know we like to have
Yeah.
more than one. I just don't want to, I wanted it to be a select board
Well,
decision.
if we're gonna do it right away and get the stuff out there and, have the bids
Yeah.
back by.
I mean, we can have them back, I can put it
Mid-November.
out tomorrow, and I can
Okay.
have it back by the November 15th.
Great,
Was
Okay, and that
the
wouldn't
one-
affect.
Was that the one that was like 58,000 for
Yes.
the project?
yeah.
The reason being is that we've waited so long, the cost is supposedly has gone down, and there are, like I said, other companies. And I can also call them and ask them why they didn't bid.
Yep.
You need a motion to move on it or no? or-
Well, no, I don't
I
think we
can
do.
just
As
put it
long
back
as-
out.
As long as we're gonna do
there's a
it,
consensus.
as long as we're gonna do it right away. I thought this was gonna
consensus.
Yes.
wait
So
another
that
6
won't
months.
change.
No.
That won't
We're
change
gonna
the
do it
time.
right
No.
away, I'm all in favor of
Yep.
that, that's fine.
Sounds fine to me.
Yep. I just don't want those savings to disappear
Right.
because we're wasting time, and you're not, so.
I'm
thank
trying
you.
not to.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Update on chief of police process.
Done.
Sorry. Anything, Clint?
Done.
Done.
No, we already did that in my report.
Good job, Julie.
Thanks.
Do we have a meeting time yet or anything?
Waiting to hear from one member.
Okay.
Age-friendly community
Okay, I just
discussion.
have to excuse me for 1 minute.
Is this your?
No, it's Jan. It's all
Jan's?
Jan.
Oh,
That was the thing that we.
that was the thing,
All
yeah.
right.
Yes. Okay, I had something for Julie, too. She'll be back. Well, I did spend 3 days at conferences since we last met. And I was really hoping John Higgins would be here, because he was one that talked about age a little bit. So I went to one of them was in Augusta, the state. It was, used to be called the Summit on Aging, and now it's called the Wisdom Summit. I just like that. Anyway, it was really well done. There were lots of vendors in addition to panels and speakers. It was really, it was very good. And so what they did was, what the whole purpose of that particular summit was to make sure that as we age, we can all live healthy, active, engaged lives in our homes and communities, no matter what type of support we might need. And I was thinking, I went to this for two reasons. One, because like you, I'm not getting younger. I think we're all aging. Everybody is aging. And because we live in Maine, which is the oldest state in the Union, and we live in Lincoln County, which is the oldest county in Maine. So we do have quite an elderly population here, and it's getting larger. They had a lot of statistics, I have them here somewhere, about within the next 7 years, how many people, like 25%, will be over 65. Let's hear some, oh, it's this folded one, I think. Yeah, there are a lot of statistics that talk about the aging in our particular area. So we're the largest community by size and population in Lincoln County. So it would make sense that we do something for the town. And what we all do better when we all do better. So if people who are aging are doing better, then that helps the young people will do better. That will help lots of areas. If young people do better, those of us who are aging, not that they aren't aging, will do better also. So those are the reasons I went, and just to see what they had to offer and what might help. There are, at this point, 59 communities that are considered age-friendly. They're certified age-friendly through one organization. That's just through one group, and there are a number of them. I have all of those that are listed. There are other communities that are age-friendly, and it's also helping people age in place so that you can stay in your home or at least stay in your community, depending on what your needs are. Then, that was one day. The next thing, I went to Elder Care put it on, and that's in Damariscotta, and they put on a wonderful conference. It was an evening, and we listened to a fellow who's working on Alzheimer's research that was really very interesting. And the next day was an all-day, there were 4 panels, and the people who spoke at these panels were amazing. They're really some top-notch people. There was a lot of discussion that went on. And it just, there were a couple of people from Waldoboro there. And since we've set goals for Julie, for her to work on, but I don't believe we've really set any goals for ourselves. You know, as a board, what we might want to put our energy into. And although I don't know that it was on our list of time things, I just thought it was a need. I thought it was interesting, and there are lots of resources out there that will help us, and they can be just really small steps. There were some things that I got, just be a safe walker. Here's the walkability checklist for our town. You are the walker. So
I am the walker.
you can look at that. There was stuff on, just on traffic patterns and how that is helpful. And I know Katie is really good and is interested in traffic patterns, so I got you that. And fishability, how about that for you guys? I only have one of them though. Fishability supports fishermen and women who experience barriers to employment such as aging, injury, or chronic illness. Agribility, same thing with farmers. We have agricultural part of our community. And Seniors Plus, something. And I don't know, I just thought it would be worth a discussion if we could discuss you know, I have some of this shows some of the details and the how-tos to get started, and a lot of resources, information on resources in that pile. And then I have other information here. I just thought it was worth a discussion to see what we could do in our town that would help the aging population, which in fact would help the entire population. There's some really interesting things on how it affects the economy in a positive way. And also what people over, I think it's over 55 or whatever, how they contribute to the community, and to look at the contributions to the community rather than think of them as, where they used to, oh, they're old and we'll put them over here and sort of take them away from the.
That sounds so cruel.
What?
We're gonna put them over there.
No, that's what had.
I think as I'm getting closer to that,
It
it's
is.
just getting scarier.
Well, that was the mentality. That used to be the mentality.
I
Okay,
know.
they're old, we'll put them over there,
Okay.
and they're not involved in the community. And one of the biggest factors in the aging community, the negative factors, is isolation. And communities can deal with that.
Yeah.
They can set up ways so that people are not isolated. Transportation is another issue with older people as they give up their driver's license. Falling is something that is important. John Gatcomb just fell recently and broke his hip. I don't know if you knew that, a couple
No, I
days
didn't
ago,
know
and
that.
he's in his 80s, but a real active kind of guy in town. And that's, I don't know why he fell, but that is an issue. And also there are ways to deal with that, to look at that, and I thought it'd be good for a conversation.
So do you want to put that on the goals list? Do you want to have a discussion at another meeting and review all those goals?
You want to
again?
have a workshop?
Is that what you would?
Well, I think a workshop, and, you know, if we could, I'll try to get some copies of resources just to see what's going on. And right next door, at Elder Care in Lincoln County, was interesting, and I can make some copies of some of this stuff. This was and what this conference, the Summit on the Wisdom Summit, it was dealing with, this was put out by the, what's that, who is the famous person? Anyway, it's through the school, what's his name? Muskie, the Muskie School of Public Service. They brought out this charting a pathway forward, redesigning and realigning supports and services for Maine's older adults. And so this conference was to kind of learn what this is and what they can do to get on that pathway. And why shouldn't we be on that pathway, setting that course?
So we'll schedule that for the first meeting in December?
Okay, I'll try and get some of that stuff
Or
together.
is, yeah, that would work, because we have the auditor coming. Yeah, the first meeting in December, is that good for you?
Sure.
Okay.
It'd be like a gift to our community.
Yeah, Santa
Okay.
gift, Santa's coming.
Yes,
Great.
like that.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
And the 11.6, which you really haven't voted to put on the agenda, but I'll use my prerogative as chairman
Yes.
to just do it. Can we have a motion to
Just do it.
authorize Julie to pursue a grant for the ladder truck?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
And are we going back into executive to finish our 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock discussion?
Well, that was the idea. What's the consensus of the board? You want to get this done tonight?
I have one item that we need to discuss if we're going to have somebody else at the next executive. So I would do a really quick one to discuss personnel under
Well, this is,
1 MRSA 4056A.
Okay.
And it would be contract negotiations.
what's your pleasure?
Second.
Want to do it?
Well, it's gonna only take 10 minutes.
Okay.
Sounds good?
All in favor? All right.
Sorry, I didn't mean to keep you,
Executive
Peg.
session.
I know, but
Get out of her way.
I got a quick question, if you have a second.
Yes.
I was curious if you were willing to release the names of the candidates. When is that going to be?
How you doing?
When can I